Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Newseum's Walter and Leonore Annenberg Theater. I'm Jan Newharth, Chair and Chief Executive Officer of the Freedom Forum. We are thrilled to welcome you all here tonight for a very special evening, as we are joined by award-winning actor, singer, producer, director, and activist, Alan Cumming. Alan joins us tonight to help us mark the recent opening of our new exhibit, Rise Up, Stonewall, and the LGBTQ Rights Movement. The exhibit marks the 50th anniversary of the June 1969 police raid of the Stonewall Inn in New York and the protests that followed, which are considered to be the catalyst that inspired the modern gay liberation movement. Through powerful artifacts, images, and historic print publications, Rise Up explores the story of the men and women who used their First Amendment freedoms to challenge injustice and fight mistreatment. Every day through our exhibits and programs, the Newseum strives to increase public understanding of the importance of a free press and the First Amendment. Visitors experience the story of news, the role of a free press in major events in history, and how the core freedoms of the First Amendment, religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition, apply to their lives. We look forward to hearing from Alan about his thoughts on the legacy of Stonewall, as well as his own social activism. And yes, we'll also hear about his incredible and varied career on the big screen, the small screen, and the stage. His biography is way too long to read in my short time on stage, but I will tell you, he has played God, the devil, Hitler, the Pope, a teleporting superhero, Hamlet, and all the parts in Macbeth, and a lot more. He's also been nominated for a number of Emmys and Golden Globe Awards, and won the Tony Award in 1998 for his performance in Cabaret. I want to also note that earlier today, Alan unveiled a new signature suite at Washington's Hamilton Hotel, which he curated, featuring artifacts and images that illustrate key moments in the advancement of the LGBTQ movement. The Newseum is so pleased to be partnering with the Hamilton on this suite. We're in very good hands with tonight's moderator, Ari Shapiro. Co-host of NPR's award-winning news magazine, All Things Considered. Ari began his journalism career as an intern for NPR's Nina Totenberg, and during his career at NPR has served as an international correspondent, filing stories from 5 continents, as well as a White House correspondent during President Obama's first and second terms. Ari also has his own entertainment chops. He is an occasional singer, having made guest appearances with the little orchestra Pink Martini, and has performed live at many of the world's most storied venues, including Carnegie Hall. This is a third in a series of programs related to Rise Up, and I want to give special thanks to the Reef team, TTR Sotheby's International Realty, for its generous support of the exhibit and programming series. I also want to thank Wells Fargo for its generous support of the series and exhibit, as well as give special recognition to Altria, Capital Pride Alliance, the Washington Blade, and our Stonewall Circle donors. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Del Galloway, Vice President of Communications for Wells Fargo.
Storytelling. It is fundamental to who we are. In the New York Times, John Leland writes about long-term relationships and the stories we tell ourselves. He writes, "Memory is a tricky thing, subjective, malleable to the needs of narrative or the fog of time." He continues, "The style of memory we create is toward constructive story-making. We remember the stories we tell about our lives. We invent our lives in the remembering. Leland was writing about two men together for 58 years and counting. A love story. Here in this house, the Newseum, the telling of stories is paramount. It is in their DNA. It is their raison d'etre, their reason for being. Through storytelling, the Newseum pays homage to events that shape our lives. After all, news is the first draft of history. Good evening. By the way, you all look fantastic. I just have to tell you, we got a full house. It is with great pleasure, passion, and pride that Wells Fargo partners with the Newseum, the Kurt Bell, the Reef team, and others to tell the story of Stonewall and the evolution of the LGBTQ movement these past 50 years. These are important stories in the canon of American civil and equal rights. And tonight, our journey continues as we hear from Alan Cumming, beloved artist and activist, moderated by the wonderful Ari Shapiro. It is big, important stuff. We are so glad you're here. Enjoy the program.
Thank you, Del. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Curtis T. Bell of the Curtis T. Bell Foundation.
First of all, I just want to say that Jan Neurath and Del, Ryan Merkel, who was here before, they were all responsible for this. They all have tremendous responsibilities with the things that are going on in the Newseum right now, and I love them all. I got involved in this early on with my closest brothers in the Reef team at Sotheby's. They're my family. Now I'm going to tell you a little story some of you have heard. Hopefully it'll make you laugh. I think it will. I am 76 years old. I'm a native Washingtonian. And my mother and father sent us to the best schools. It was a mixed marriage. She was a Southern Baptist from the mountains of North Carolina, and he was an agnostic Jew from Philadelphia. But it was a good marriage. It worked very well, 53 years. And they sent us initially kindergarten to Sidwell Friends before they sent me to Georgetown Prep. Of course, I was really confused at that point. I think I called myself ecumenical. In any event, the first report card that came back from Sidwell Friends, and I wish I had it today, and some of you have heard this story, Mrs. Dillette said, now, kindergarten, Curtis loves to put on high heels and play with the girls. So I tell you, it's not learned behavior. It's there, whether you want it or not. I love all of you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Curtis. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ari Shapiro and our very special guest, Alan Cumming.
Hi, Alan.
Hello, Ari Shapiro.
You get one night a week off from your play in New York, and you chose to spend it with us. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And it's only running for 2 more weeks, so you have 2 weeks to get up and see Daddy the play. There are a bunch of events happening in conjunction with this exhibition, and ours is going to focus on popular culture and Stonewall and LGBTQ rights. And so I would love if you could start by taking us back to your childhood and telling us the first pop culture figure that you remember who was queer. Were there any, to start with? I mean,
yes,
as a child, there were.
Yes, there were. There's a really amazing man called Stanley Baxter, who was a sort of, it's an interesting time, like in the 50s in Britain, or in Scotland especially, there was sort of this, you could be like a serious actor and do variety, and have this sort of variety career, and he decided to go on the variety career. And he was this sort of, you know, he did these lavish shows that were sort of homages to Hollywood films and all stuff. And there was a gay sensibility that I understood before I understood, if you know what I mean. And then many years later, I got to do this TV show called Alan Cumming Meets Stanley Baxter. I got to interview.
That was the name of the TV show?
Yes. It's called When Alan Cumming
creative.
Met Stanley Baxter. And you know, he was such an idol of mine. He was an idol of everyone in Scotland.
And was it a sort of Liberace type situation where people who knew, but
yes.
the housewives didn't?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he lived, he had a, you know, boyfriend for decades, but he's still, and his house, Stanley's house was here, and his wife's house was here. It was a little lane in Highgate, and then the boyfriend's house was here, and the wife and the boyfriend used to meet for coffee every morning.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very sort of, you know.
Did you learn that when you did the TV show?
Yeah, because we went, and the thing was, what was really interesting was that he still didn't want to, when we did the TV show, he told me lots of things. In a funny sort of way, I think he saw something of himself in me, and he talks about how there was this play he did in the West End, and he was asked to go to Broadway with it. And he was ultimately too scared to go to Broadway because he thought that was going to put a sort of spotlight on his life and his private life and take him on a different journey. And he was worried that his gayness would be found out. And so me, as someone who was Scottish, who'd done a thing that went to Broadway, and I think he saw this, what might have been sort of thing. It was really interesting. So he was very, very vocal, and we had long dinners and chats. But when we did the program, he was like, don't mention the gay thing.
Did you and he talk about your, I don't know whether to call it your decision or your ability to be out professionally and his decision or ability not to be?
Yes, we did. And I think it was much more to do with, like, you know, the circumstances of the time. It was completely, you know, from another generation. And
But the circumstances of your time were not all that gay-friendly for Hollywood and Broadway and the West End and the places that you were finding work.
No, but it was sort of like, it was a different time. It was like, you know, the 50s in Britain, and, you know, it just wasn't possible for him. And then I think you get that sort of, there's a generation of older gay men who, even though we have, things are different now, it's so ingrained in them to not be able to, even actually, I remember really clear, this is a sort of slight diversion in the story, but I knew Gore Vidal a little bit before he died, and I once went to visit him in his house in Italy, in Ravello, and he'd been with his partner Howard for like 300 years. I can't remember the name, but like a long time. And they lived in this beautiful house, and he was very, very open and very vocal about everything. And I went there with my then boyfriend, and a lot of crazy stuff happened, including that I thought they'd split up. Like, they had a row and were shouting at each other. And Howard was like, that's it, Gore, it's over. In the morning, I'm out of here. And I was like, oh my God. The next morning, I thought, I'm here the night that Gore and Howard finally split up after 55 years. And the next morning, I go down kind of all, you know, worried about what's going on. And Howard's like, wasn't that a great night? And nothing's mentioned. But we were having breakfast, and at the breakfast table, and there's a little lady called Maria, was, you know, the sort of maid making our breakfast and stuff. And we were chatting, and I literally put my hand on my boyfriend's hand, like this, under the chair. And Howard sort of rapped my knuckles and said, not in front of Maria.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maria was presumably changing the sheets on their bed, not to be too explicit, but like, you know, Maria had seen a couple things.
I'm sure Maria had seen a lot, but I found that so, it was just that to me, I understand that sort of generational, it's so ingrained not to be free and not to be vocal or visible.
Well, one reason I ask is that I think for people in a certain window of time, sort of like from maybe shortly before your childhood to maybe 10 years after my childhood, the first gay person they met was often somebody who they didn't actually meet, but who they saw in popular culture. You know, whether that was a sort of Liberace type figure or whether that was a character in a movie or a TV show. And so I think for the pop culture can play, and to some extent still does play, a really powerful role in showing people a model of what they can be when those people are young and figuring out what it means to be gay.
Totally.
And yet, for many years, those characters were victims or camp best friends or very narrowly defined kinds of
Or
figures.
stereotypes or caricatures.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it actually really interesting in this country, especially because the sort of image of gayness and the way that's been, until fairly recently, has been kind of projected into our culture is incredibly stereotyped. I mean, like, I don't mean to, like, be mean, but, you know, Will and Grace was this sort of revolutionary thing in our culture, right? Mm-hmm. It's a gay man who never has sex, who's really in love with a straight woman, and a flaming queen and a dipsomaniac best friend. It's all really hackneyed, terrible stereotypes. And although that's a great show and they did great things, actually, sometimes you have to, you know, push the wall down with stereotypes because that's the only thing that anyone can understand or relate to. But when you stand back from it, it's a little galling.
Well, but you know, Joe Biden said that Will and Grace did more for gay rights in America than any politician.
I'm sure that's true. That's not much, is it?
And so it's this double-edged sword, right? Do you think that pop culture can do more than politics to advance the ball?
Totally. I mean, I think that's why I'm really pissed off with Beyonce, because...
That was not a direction I expected this conversation to go.
I mean, I've let it go, but on the day of... Was it on the day of the last election? On the afternoon of was it the last presidential election or the midterms or something? She came out and supported someone, you know, a Democratic person, thankfully, but...
Stacey Abrams? Was that it? Yeah,
It was
Stacey Abrams in Georgia, right.
That's right, that's what it was. It was on the afternoon, so most people had probably voted already, and she waited until that moment. And we all know that if Beyonce had come out a few days before and gone and anointed Stacey Abrams, she would have won. And I feel like that's, you know, I just think grow some balls, Beyonce. Do you know what I mean? Like, be aware of your own power. Because, or else don't use your power. I get if some people don't want to do that, if they're artists, and like, fair enough, I think that's your decision. I don't approve of it or respect you, but I think fair enough. But don't do it halfway, you know what I mean? Because really what I felt she was doing was salving her own conscience, but actually not really making that much difference.
So given what you've said about the sort of cliche nature of gay characters, especially in American media and pop culture, and also the power of media and pop culture to shape the narrative and change people's minds, how, when you were earlier in your career, did you conceive of the path that you were going to take in that respect?
I don't think it was really a kind of conscious thing, Ari. I just did things that I felt were right for me. It wasn't, I didn't have a grand scheme. And
I mean, like, was there any ever question in your mind of whether you would be out professionally or not?
No. No, it wasn't. No. But then, you know, it was different circumstances in my life. Like I recently interviewed Cynthia Nixon, and I was able to say to her for this thing I'm doing, this kind of show about iconic people I think are iconic. And I said to her, I've been longing to be able to say this. We share something, Cynthia Nixon, other than our great talent and our love of New York, but also we've both been married to a man and a woman. And how do the press relate to you? I mean, like, people are freaked out when I tell them that. So, you know, and I bring that up because when I was married to a woman in my 20s, even though I had a boyfriend before that, you know, it's an interesting thing when you get more famous and people are more interested in your personal life or private life. Because you sort of feel, well, you know, I had sex with a boy, should I put out a press release? You know, and, and I think there becomes a point when you feel it's appropriate because, you know, it just becomes appropriate to talk in that way and you realize that you have some sort of, you know, it's not just about you.
Yeah.
But it was never
So you
a thing
did put out a press release when you had sex with a boy,
No.
is what you're saying.
It would have been far too much paper wasted.
There was a quote that I was looking for today and couldn't find it, and so I'm going to mangle it. But somebody much smarter and more eloquent than me said, a minority group knows that it has arrived when a villain who belongs to that minority group does not reflect poorly on the whole group. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes, yes.
So you have played unsavory gay characters, including right now in the play Daddy. You play this unsavory gay character. Perhaps
guess.
unsavory is not the word, but
Not unsavory, but like, you know.
But especially over the decades of being in the public eye and playing sometimes queer characters, did you ever think, like, what does this mean for the gays? Is this going to reflect poorly on the queers? Is the LGBTQ community going to be served by this role? Or was that ever a thought in your mind?
Yes, but I mean, I don't think I would ever do something that was really, you know, going to make a long-lasting negative impact to us. You know, I don't think I would ever do that. But I think it's really important not to be all kind of, you know, oh, we're all so lovely and caring.
Yeah.
I think you've
Well,
got
those
to
aren't
be,
interesting roles anyway.
They're not interesting roles, but I've played a lot of people who are, you know, not very nice or do terrible things. But so does, you know, that's just life. But I think actually it shows that we're, you know, culturally, how we're presented in our culture growing up, if we're able to embrace those things and realize that that's not actually, you know, not every gay person has got to be nice on TV. And also, but now, conversely, not every gay person that we see has got to be sick or their sexuality is the main thrust of their narrative.
Or gay bashed. Or
Gay bashed. That's, and then also, you know, it comes down to, I'm really pissed off now. Gosh, I'm pissed off a lot tonight, I realize.
First Beyonce.
I'm pissed off about the way that, and you know, great publications that I actually read and subscribe to do this, that they put a prefix of someone's, including myself, sexuality before their name. So I always get gay or queer or bisexual actor Alan Cumming. And I said the last, I can't remember when it was, I took umbrage and referred back to the New York Times and said, you would never say straight actor, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's that to me seems, these things seem to be have much more portent than I used to feel they did.
It's funny, I saw you post about that, and I thought, I'm not sure that I agree with you.
Well,
because
fuck you,
when I was a
Shakira.
kid, I feel like
Fuck you,
there
Beyonce.
are categories of minority status that we wear visibly on our
Yes.
body,
Yes,
and
yeah.
sexual orientation is not necessarily one of them. And if I'm a kid admiring an actor, knowing that that actor is gay, and seeing that reference in the New York Times is not a source of shame, but another fact about the person's existence.
I hear your point, Addy. I absolutely, and I agree with that. But I don't think many, you know, confused little lesbians from Indiana are going to be reading the New York Times. And I think the library is open. But I think where it does more damage is that it reinforces that for well-read, well, hello.
Somebody's making a
Tickers.
sound effect that's, yeah.
You know, well-read cosmopolitan people who read the New York Times are thinking that's okay. And actually, sometimes I think you have to choose your battle. And I do really understand your point. And I'm very much someone, I don't care what my... It was in the point when it was made was in conjunction with, I think it was at the Golden Globes or something. It was about Ben Whishaw. And I thought, what the fuck has his sexuality got to do with it? And, you know, they didn't say it about other people, and it just really got to me. But I do think, I'm totally, please put a prefix in front of me when I go out into the world, but don't allow educated, privileged, mostly white people to think that that's okay for them to do it as well, and just to propagate that way that we define someone by their sexuality only.
You're mentioning Ben Whishaw at the Golden Globes makes me think of another debate around LGBT rights and visibility and popular culture, which is coming out of the Oscars. There was a lot of criticism that wonderful actors who gave wonderful performances all happened to be straight people playing queer actors, playing queer characters,
Yeah.
whether it was Rami Malek in We Will Rock You, playing Freddie Mercury, or Melissa McCarthy, playing the lesbian writer, Lee, her last name escapes me, or Olivia Colman in The Favourite.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a lot. I didn't realize, yeah.
And I've heard queer actors say, I don't want to be pigeonholed into playing only queer roles, and therefore I think straight people should be able to play LGBTQ roles too. But there was a lot of criticism about this at the Oscars. How do you feel about, do you think it's a legitimate critique?
I do. Like your point about the prefix thing, I think there's room for another side to the argument. But I think, I don't, see, it used to be that the problem was that happened because there weren't enough out people, famous out people, because it's all about, you know, the argument used to be, well, there's not enough famous gay people to open a movie. So that's why we don't cast a gay person in a gay role, because blah, blah, blah. Now that's not the case. So now I don't think it's just that, you know, those people got those parts because there's not some gay person who could have played it. They just decided to go with that person. And I do think that we're in a new phase of all that actually there are enough out gay people. Now I think there's other areas like, you know, like disabled people I feel are underrepresented in that way, and often able-bodied people play disabled parts. And I mean, I think that's, you know, we need to have more famous disabled people so that they, you know, see what I mean? That kind of whole thing. Because it's a business, so we're actually not, if you look at it in a business model, we're not allowing people to succeed in business. And when we do, whoever that minority is, then everything will be better. But I sort of think, conversely, I get a bit pissed off when, with Beyonce and other people, that when some gay actors get angry about not being cast in things. And I think it's not necessarily about playing, you know, certain, can't play other roles other than gay. I just think, I truly believe that if you're not convincing us something, then you shouldn't play it. You shouldn't be allowed. And I think we shouldn't mistake people's lack of convincingness at certain things as a homophobic slur against them. And I think that it's a very complicated area, but I think we've got to just like, I feel there's enough out gay people now not to worry that potentially someone gay could have played that part. Maybe they just didn't look enough like Freddie Mercury.
You are also in the TV show Instinct right now.
I am.
Where your character is the first openly gay leading character in a network TV drama.
Yes.
Were you surprised that it took this long?
Yes. I mean, it's like a great thing and a terrible thing at the same time. Every time, you know, someone says it, I'm like, it was last year this show premiered and new season's coming out soon. So 2018, and there's never been a network drama with a gay character as the lead. And it's another thing about, you know, American culture that I find so fascinating that, you know, and also in terms of the way that we've mostly, when we think back on gay characters in our culture, they are more likely to be stereotypes and caricatures. And what I really like about our show is it's a cop show, right? It's just a kind of, you know, we solve a mystery, blah, blah. But there's also, he's gay. And he has a husband, and they're adopting a kid. And I really like, I think and also is a really great mantra for any group of people who are trying to have equality and, you know, but also are trying to integrate themselves in a way where their minority is not the first thing that is discussed. And I just think it's, you know, and the negative way that gay people have been portrayed, or the negative way their stories, their narrative has been illness, problems, la, la, la. I really like the fact that millions and millions and millions of people in America will have seen for the first time a gay person and his husband in a cop show, in a procedural cop show. And I do think that's the way to go right now. I feel like in America, everyone's got very further to either end of the political spectrum, and they're just shouting at each other. And nobody's going to change their mind when they're being shouted at. And I think the way to go is to just go, hey, here's another representation of something you may not have seen, but aren't they? They're not scary, are they? And I think that's what I like about our show.
I remember when I was covering the 2012 campaign and Mitt Romney said his favorite show was Modern Family.
Isn't
And I
that
just
nuts?
thought, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, yet look at your political platform, Mitt.
Because this is the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. You were 4 years old when Stonewall happened?
Yes,
Do you
how
remember
nice
when
of you to bring that up.
Do you remember when you first learned about it?
No, I don't, but I would have been an adult. I don't.
Well, no, I mean, I didn't assume that you would have learned about it at age 4, but was
No.
there I mean, this is the thing. It's like, most Jewish kids are raised by Jewish parents. Most Latinx kids are raised by Latinx parents. Most gay kids are raised by straight parents. So you sort of have to do your own education at some point.
Yeah.
Or find somebody to educate you.
That's so true.
Do you remember what your Stonewall education was?
I really don't think it was until there's a bar in London called Stonewall. So maybe I found out about it because of a bar. But about the whole thing. But I don't remember specifically. But it's amazing, like living in New York and going to the Stonewall and passing it and just
crazy,
thinking
right?
and just like seeing all the images of when the riots happened in that little island of that little park and triangular park. That's where it all happened. It's sometimes funny when you, like I'm from Scotland obviously, and there's huge sort of amazing historical things have happened everywhere in Scotland because it's a tiny country and it's very old. And so you see this, like the Battle of Culloden, for example, and you go to the place and it's like this tiny little field. And you just imagine all these people like trying to kill each other and about the whole future of our country. And that's what I feel about Stonewall. It's this tiny little thing. And just the passion of that and the energy that happened in that little area, it's so incredible. And it has this passionate energy. It continues to this day, and I think that's what's amazing about it. It's not about the size and the magnitude of the actual event. It's about the energy that it pushes out into the world.
And there is an explicit popular culture connection to it because of the death of Judy Garland.
Yes, which I think is fascinating, because we're sort of chatting a little bit about this before, because, I think there's a sort of lack of willingness to link the death of the funeral of Judy Garland, which was that same day as the Stonewall riot happened, because people sort of feel in some way it demeans this political movement because it's a sort of a popular cultural iconic thing. And I think it makes total sense that those two things would be connected. And I feel it's sort of internalized homophobia, that they're not more connected and more embraced, because I feel like as gay people, we connect with people that we feel have a hard time and have had to fight and are maybe have a magical quality to them, but are having to hide that magical quality, sometimes be subjugated to the wills of others. That's completely the gay experience, and that's why we like Wonder Woman, and why we like Judy Garland, and why we like these people that we can feel their sensibility of having to struggle and to overcome things to be themselves, and maybe are struggling with other addictions and other things that are quite prevalent in our community. So I feel that there's not a missing link, but it's not been fully embraced enough, the idea that on the day that Judy Garland's dead body was just a few streets away when this riot happened. And it was I can understand why, in the midst of all those raids and all the terrible things that were happening. And also, you remember, in a culture in America where all these, the civil rights riots were happening, and in France, the students were rioting, there's this whole sort of thing in the world of people that are going, fuck this, I'm mad as hell. And the idea that this person who had been such a kind of poster girl for your internal feelings had died, I can completely see why that would be the spur to just push you over the edge and start something. So I'm kind of a little saddened that that's not more well known, yeah, and connected.
Was there a female figure who was that for you when you were younger?
Well, perhaps Wonder Woman, actually. I forgot this, because my husband, Grant, is a huge fan of Wonder Woman. And once I was at this thing and Linda Carter was there, and I've never seen him so giddy. He's completely sort of, he's not a giddy, giggly person, but he was really like shaky and everything because he's going to meet Wonder Woman. But my brother told me recently that he's a little older than me, and he was a draftsman. He worked in this architect's office, and they had these magazines in the lobby, and he said that there was an article about Wonder Woman, and I'd asked him to cut it out and bring it home for me, and so he did, and Farrah Fawcett. So
The article was not about Wonder Woman and Farrah Fawcett. You're saying Farrah Fawcett was also that kind of person in your life.
Yes, because I remember I had the Farrah poster like that. But there's something kind of transgressive about Farrah Fawcett, I thought. She wasn't just a cute girl. There was something kind of more interesting about it. But anyway, but also Wonder Woman, the thing of someone who has a secret, all this secret and this power and all this immense thing, but has to hide it in the everyday world. You can see the allegory there.
You were really involved in getting the Stonewall Bar declared a national monument in 2016, I think it was.
Yeah.
How did you become involved in that?
They just asked me, and I...
Got a couple things I'd like you to get involved in.
Yeah.
Just ask.
But I think that, there's some things like that are, no-brainers. I mean, I just sort of thought, wow, yes, what a great idea. And I think also, it's funny when you get to an age where you think places you've been and you frequent and you understand they've been important, but that you have to actually think, wow, this is a part of history, and I've got to, and people I know that actually are historical figures, that you just are your friends, and you think, oh gosh, I think that's a really interesting when you come to realize that. And so that was why I feel it's actually really important. And also I feel, we're obviously living in a time now where people of various minorities, heritage and culture and voice and presence is being threatened. So all the more reason to make sure that these things are entrenched in our culture and our historical sort of story.
You have been such a vocal activist for so many different causes that you believe in, whether it's animal rights or Scottish independence or LGBTQ rights and on and on and on. Was there ever a point, perhaps earlier in your career, when you had not yet achieved a level of success where you thought, is there a risk to using my voice in this way when I'm trying to make people believe I'm somebody else on stage or on screen if I become associated with this cause?
I never felt that, Ari. I never felt that. I feel like I come from a culture and a country that the phrase I most remember from my childhood is, that's not fair. And if something was not fair in the schoolyard or in the classroom or anywhere, that was like the worst thing you could say, and that would be a reason people to stop doing whatever, bullying or saying whatever they're doing, and to make amends. And I feel like when you come from it's so difficult to describe how difficult it is for me or it was to kind of understand America, because, I feel like a whore when I go to the dentist and get my credit card out. Just that act in itself, the idea that money is in relation to your teeth is very difficult. When you're used to, healthcare being free, and there'd be no reason to take money to the dentist, and educate all those things that I used to take for granted, and now I get furious with my Scottish friends and family that they take it for granted when I see that it's, other rich countries like America don't have it. And I feel the idea of a safety net is something that you look after other people, and you make sure that if someone does slip through the net, that you're going to be there to help them up. That's a cultural DNA sort of thing for certain countries. And I'm not making a judgment about it. I am, I suppose, but I'm not, it's just how I was brought up. Mm-hmm. And I agree with it, and I'm very, for it. But when you have had that upbringing, it's not sort of like, politics and social issues are not a hobby for me. They're just like, I feel if I wasn't famous, I would still be shouting about the things I shout at, but I just wouldn't have as big a megaphone.
I hear about so many performers, actors, musicians who are starting to make it big, who are told by their agents or managers,
Oh, yes.
"Ooh, be careful, maybe better not to do that. You're just on
Quickly.
the upswing." Did you have that?
No, I didn't. I mean, I think I was always quite, forthright in my in my intentions. No, I don't think they really tried to do that. I mean, I remember the one thing like that happened, and it wasn't really in the same league at all, but once when I was very, very young, like 20, there was some movie happening, and somehow I got an audition, and they wanted, and it was to play this English part, and this is like centuries ago, and they said, my agent said to me, "You've got to pretend to be English when you go into the meeting, because if you go in with your own Scottish voice, they won't take you seriously. They won't think you can play this part." And so I did it. I went to London, and I said, "Hello, I'm Alan," blah, blah. And I felt so dirty and so sort of unauthentic and just not, I don't know, I couldn't ever do it again. And it wasn't successful either.
Yeah.
Because I probably was being so, inauthentic when I was being that person to those other people. I don't know, I just didn't, that was the only time I sort of gave not being myself a go.
That's amazing, because being an actor can be such a meat grinder for your sense of self and your sense of self-worth. I'm speaking generally for one's sense of self and for one's sense of self-worth, that to have from that early an age had a sense of, no, these are my skills and these are my attributes and this is who I am and this is uncompromised. This is not something I'm going to compromise on, and also I deserve this role and you're going to give it to me, and they did. It's not something I've ever heard from any actor.
Well, they didn't give me the role, but but I feel, I don't know, I feel also maybe even then I make a lot of, I realize this, it's like duh, but I make a lot of my own work. I write things and I do concerts, and I've always made a lot of my work in various ways, and even then I was actually. So I've never felt completely reliant on the phone ringing or, other people saying yes to me. And even when I didn't have any clout in that way. So I think that's part of it as well. I think when you have some value of yourself and sense of self-worth because you've made things, I think that changes how you look at yourself and how you value yourself.
I think most Americans probably became aware of you because of Cabaret. Is that your sense?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It's a couple of films before that, but
yeah.
I think that was my tipping point.
But I feel like it's really unusual for somebody to make it big on the stage.
Theater, I know.
And
yeah.
become a household name through a stage role.
Yes, I have lots of ideas about why that is.
Share one or two of them.
Because I remember once I went to I was in somewhere in the middle of America, like Minnesota or Indiana or something, and I went. Are those in the middle? I hope.
Ish. They're the Midwest.
I was somewhere in, where I'd never been before, and I went in some cafe, and I could see people were recognizing me. I thought, oh, they've seen me in some film or something. And this guy went, "You're the Cabaret guy." And I was like, "Yes, I am." I mean, did you see the show? He was like, "No." And I thought that was really interesting because I think that show had this sort of interesting place in the zeitgeist because of, and my theory is that, so I came to live in New York in 1998, beginning of 1998. I remember sitting at my kitchen table watching the news about the Clinton scandal. And it's so interesting. I saw an interview with Monica today on John Oliver's show.
Yeah.
And she said one of the reasons why it's been so difficult for her over the years is because the scandal was named after her.
Right.
And I'm going to call it the Clinton scandal now to let him deal with the shit. And and I remember thinking, what's going on in this country? There's the president had an affair. Is that really big news? Is that really huge news? And, it's obviously big news and if it were in Britain and blah, blah, but it wouldn't rock the country's sort of whole, roots. It would not be the idea that people were so upset about the actual act of that happening was shocking to me. And I feel that cabaret at that point, which was so much about sexual freedom, and I played someone that was very symbolic of the whole production and was very about sexual freedom, kind of androgyny, and definitely about bisexuality and all those things that were kind of very taboo subjects at that time. And interestingly, I did it, 16 years later, just a couple of years ago, and I think it was better because I think our culture...
Because my college roommate was in it with you.
That's right. Yes, lovely Benjamin. But also all the sex stuff was still fun and sexy, but it didn't overshadow the whole production. It didn't dominate in the way that I think. So I think the whole darkness of the story came through. So I think it was a more successful production in 2015 than it was in 1998. But I think that was that show, because of the Clinton scandal and the whole way that the prurience and the shock about sexuality. And I remember seeing this woman on the news going, I had to tell my daughter what a blowjob was. And I was like, well, you should have to tell your daughter what a blowjob is. They're doing you a favor. And I think, in a way, that kind of the perfect storm of those two things made that show much more sort of an explosive and relevant, and why people recognize me from that rather than a movie which is probably seen by more people.
Huh. We're now in a moment where, thanks to peak television and the Netflix, Hulu, Amazonization of entertainment, there are more stories being told than ever before. Do you think there are still stories, specifically LGBTQ or more broadly, that are not being told, that deserve to be told, that you would like to see?
Yes, I really do. I feel like, our portrayal in culture is a decent and honest and accurate portrayal is a relatively new thing, right? It used to be like, it's a gay character. And then it was like, oh, it's a gay story. Tom Hanks is in it. And
He won an Oscar.
Yes, he did.
Oscar for that
but I mean, it sort of was a rare thing. So now it's quite, there's stories and, but I feel we are growing, like this, the generation of people who are making the stories are getting older. And I feel like older LGBT people's stories are not being represented very well. I really do feel that. And one of the things I think is interesting in my TV show, I don't know if you realize, but I'm a middle-aged man. And the idea that a middle-aged, I would love to see a middle-aged gay man dating. You don't see that.
I was actually just thinking about the show Grace and Frankie, which
Yes.
I think when it focuses on the women is so, so good. And when it focuses on the men is just like a different level of writing.
In
I
badly?
don't think it's as good. I mean, forgive me if I'm offending anybody, but I just think the stories,
The gay husbands.
Yeah, I don't think it's, there are two brilliant actors. I'm giving my own opinion here, which I'm not used to doing as a journalist, but I think they're two brilliant actors giving, plastic, transparent, unbelievable performances with script writing that is so shabby compared to the female characters who are extraordinary and well-written and well-acted and make the show worth watching.
But there's probably more women of their age in the writing room than are gay men.
Of a certain age, yeah.
Yeah, and that's complete. I found that in Instinct that it's been really interesting for me to kind of insist on having more LGBT people in the writer's room. And people, it's a very mixed. It's actually, the most sort of PC writing room I'm sure you've ever seen in terms of people of color, LGBT, lots of women. It's really great. But I felt like if you're going to do a story that has a gay character at the center of it, you need to have at least a few gay people in that room.
You don't seem to have many regrets.
No.
And yet, you found success on stage and on screen at a time when there were not a lot of out people being successful on stage and on screen. do you think your path would have been easier, or you would have had different kinds of opportunities or more opportunities if you had taken the same path 20 years later?
It's a difficult question to answer, Ari. It's so hypothetical. I don't feel like things are going pretty well. I don't feel like it's been. And also, I never was going to be Tom Cruise. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be.
Right. Your life is so much more interesting. Your career is so much better.
Yes, and I feel like
No, really. I mean, like.
No, I mean, I don't want to be. I often there's been a couple of times in my life where I've played like this sort of cute boy lead in a sort of thing, and it's really boring because everything happens to you rather than you. Everything. You're at the center, and all these people are doing fun things around you, and you're just reacting to it. And I actually thought that's the sort of curse of being the cute guy or the cute girl in something, is that you're just going to be the cute guy that all the fabulous people come in and steal scenes from you. And so I've never really given it much thought. And I truly don't feel, I actually feel like, so much of what I do and how I'm known and why I think people like me is because I have forged my own path and I've done the roles that I've done and I've actually been quite vocal and things like that. And I think that's just, I don't feel that my work is so separate to who I am as a person. I feel they're one big thing, and so if I'm happy with me as a person and how I am in the world, then I think that my work is, I think that's more important than my work,
Yeah.
But luckily, often they kind of merge, and I'm able to do things that I am really proud of and that mean a lot to me, and as well. So
we're going to start taking questions in just a moment. So if you want to come down, there's a microphone right there, and there's one right there. And we're going to have about 15 minutes of questions from the audience. So feel free to start making your way to the microphones. Watch your step. You've played Hamlet, you've played the Scottish King, you've played superheroes and God and the Pope and the Devil and all of those. Do you have any dream roles?
Well, I mean, it's just because I really wanted to and then they wouldn't let me. So I want to play the Miss Jean Brodie.
Miss Jean Brodie, the prime of Miss Jean Brodie.
Because I love that book so much, and there's it's run out of what do you call it, copyright or the rights thing. So so there's been this version of it that was for the screen and all the plays by J. Preston Allen, and it's very good, but it's a little less harsh than the book, and brutal, and she was a fascist. She was a fascist, this school teacher, and I had this idea with John Tiffany, who's a director that I work with often, and who I did this Macbeth with when I played all the parts and, played Lady Macbeth and everything. And I really think the idea of, there's a new version of it that's come out because now the copyright thing is out. And I really would love to, I think the idea of this man, I would be a man. It would be Mr. Brooks.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask if you'd ever played a woman before, but you're not talking about playing a woman.
No, but I would be a man in that environment, and how much more kind of transgressive and scary would that be in that time? A man who is a fascist is much more scary, actually, than a woman who is a fascist. And that's maybe a sexist comment, but I think it's true in terms of how our society would receive it and how our society has received that character. She's still very loved and sort of thought of as benign. She's a fucking fascist. And so I think, and also for a man to have a female student steal away his boyfriend would be a really fascinating thing. So I really wanted to play that, but they won't let me. So
who do I have to write a letter to?
I can give
John
you some
Tiffany?
people backstage.
Okay.
No, not John Tiffany. He's all in. Yeah.
Alan Cumming, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank
Always
you very
lovely to talk to you, Alice Apiro.
Let's take a question from the woman with the rubber chicken.
Hello, I'm Mariah. I thought of a lot of things, but I decided I should just go with the very first question that I thought of. So I actually really only know you from Spy Kids, but My mother saw Macbeth, I think 3 times or something, and she's out of town right now, but she got a ticket before she knew she'd be out of town, and she said, "Oh, Mariah, I can't go, but this guy is amazing, you should really go." So here I am. But up until, about an hour ago, I had no idea that you're Scottish. So I'm wondering if in Macbeth, if you used your own accent, because it's a Scottish play.
I did.
What, may I ask why you have a rubber chicken?
Oh, yes, I travel with it, because I travel alone a lot, and it's a really good conversation starter.
So great.
And I find that, it's a good thing to have sometimes, like now. I met John Cleese once, and he took my chicken and chewed on it, so.
Hey, if you pretended your chicken was a raven for a second, I could do a line from Macbeth.
Should I bring it to you?
No.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
But is that a raven?
Yes, I'm a raven. Nevermore.
The raven himself is horse that crooks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements.
Thank you, Mariah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Over here, the man with the beautiful necklace.
Thank you. I'm Horace. Alan, I know you love bar coming, and
Club coming.
Club Cumming.
Club coming.
Yes,
Thank you.
sorry to-
And I've been there many times, and I hear that you're there the night before, the night after, and I missed you every time. So you're not the only one who's pissed off tonight. But I was just wanted to know, how did that come about?
So this is a bar. I have a bar in New York. Thanks. I have a bar. And it's actually 2 times a day people have said to me, they've been in, and I've been, sometimes when I go, I like to serve drinks. It's such fun. I've always wanted to be a barman, and like when you're always working as an actor, if you say to your friends who've actually been bartenders that you want to be a bartender, they're like, fuck you. So it's actually quite nice to now have an excuse to actually be a bartender. But that I give very heavy pours. And 2 people today, when I was doing interviews, said, how do you make any money in that bar? Because you just give such big pours. And I was like, that's a point. Anyway, how it came about was that when I did cabaret this second time, in 2015, I bizarrely got a booze sponsor for my dressing room. Like Campari, I know. Campari America sponsored a bar in my dressing room for a year. And I'm very disarming when I have to be. And so I don't know who asked them, but they said, would you like to have free alcohol for a year? I was like, yes. And so I had this, and then we got a sign made saying Club Coming, and everyone used to come up afterwards. You were there. And we would have drinks and dance, and I would DJ and everything, and blah, blah, blah. And sometimes people would sing. And so that was the sort of the seed of it. And then after that, I would do pop-up Club Coming sometimes, and then I would do sometimes Club Coming parties after my concerts, where my band would play along, and I would DJ and would get people up and sing and do that. So the sort of what Club Coming is sort of a party with performance and fun and games and dancing and everything. And then all of a sudden, this bar in New York, which was my favorite bar, called Eastern Bloc, the owners were wanting to get rid of it. And me and my friend Daniel, who is a promoter who'd done some of my shows, went to them and said, And so when we told them what we wanted to do and make it into a cabaret space, and told them the whole sort of sensibility of Club Coming, they were so excited by that they decided to stay on and join us in it. Thank fuck, because we know nothing about how to run a bar. So now we've got this 4 of us run it, and it's this amazing thing. And there's performances every night, and it's this. And what I love most of all, I do think it's my greatest artistic achievement. I really, really do, because I feel like I've wanted a feeling and a sensibility to exist and for people to have an experience. And I've put that out into the world, and other people have come and manifested that. And that's really all you could wish as an artist, is for your idea to manifest itself. And it's this great bar that I feel is full of kindness, and all ages, all genders, all sexualities, and and it's just different things every night, and I just love it so much. And so I'll try and be there next time you're there. Thank you.
It's the greatest. I feel, when I'm at Club Cumming, I feel like the kinds of experiences that you have managed to curate for your circle of friends, you have created for anyone in the public who wants to walk in that door, and that is such a gift to the city of New York.
Isn't it
incredible.
great? Yeah, I feel it's like my, it feels my house does not actually look like that at all, but I feel that it's like how I would love to have a party in my house.
Yeah.
And when it's not like that, I feel like, oh, well, we've got to change it.
Maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yes.
Hello, it's great to see you guys. Alan, I have to admit, you really clean up well. You're looking great. Second of all, as a young child, my parents took me up to New York to see my first Broadway musical. It was Cabaret with Joel Grey.
I thought it was going to be me. I was like, my
God.
Which one of us is like got a weird age?
Dude, I'm 67, okay? And it was a watershed moment for me because I so identified with his portrayal and his character, and it was part of my coming out. So the movie came out much later. I loved it, but I've always had an allegiance to the stage musical. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking that role that is so important to me and making it your own and taking it in different directions. I love it. And I'll always be grateful. Now, the question. I remember seeing you in Goldeneye. And the one question I have for you, it was the first, that was my first realization that this is Alan Cumming. And how long did it take you to do that kind of finger exercise with the pencil? And can you still do it?
Second answer.
Yeah, there it is.
Is no. But it was one of these things where I remember like trying to do it and thinking, oh, I can't do it. I can't get it. And then I went to India for Christmas that year, and I just started filming, and they said, you've got to learn this thing, and I got the script, and I thought, oh, and I said, maybe I could do something else, because it doesn't seem like, I'm not going to be able to do it, I'm not very good at this. And my friend Dixie read the script, and she went, it's integral to the entire plot of the film. And so I remember my friend Jason actually helped me do it. And so I learned to do it with a pen just like your one, Ari, like this, right? And I could do it. I can't now. And then on the day we came to shoot that part, it was one of these sort of pens that gets thinner as it goes down to the nib, you know what I mean? And so the whole thing was different and off, and I couldn't do it. Oh. And it was just awful. There was all these cameras, like, all these cameras like this, and I'm like, finger like, ooh. And it was so shocking, because I could do it earlier. And they're like, don't worry. I'm like, I worry. And it took me ages to learn it. And in one, morning, I faked it and managed to get it together. But it was like, when you realize that something is so iconic and you're going to be asked questions about it 25 years later. Yeah. and yet it's just something that you're physically seemingly incapable of. It was terrifying. Like learning to do the pen in Goldeneye is more terrifying than learning the entire show of Macbeth for me, in my mind. So, but we faked it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see that we have 7 questions and we have about 5 minutes. So we're going to try to make this something like a lightning round, more or less.
Good evening. First of all, Mr. Shapiro, NPR is an integral part of our household. Every morning, my wife, Aikita, brings me coffee and turns on the radio, and that's the only way I can function. Mr. Cumming, what an honor, what a pleasure. And really, my wife and I, Aikita and Carmen Guzman, we just really wanted to express our gratitude let's just say there's a couple days of difference between our ages, but you were critical to our courtship. We would sing cabaret at the top of our lungs together driving around in my convertible, and I just wanted to thank you for that. And I guess our question would be, what is it like to carry the weight of what that role really winds up being and what it represents for the LGBT community in the Holocaust, and the joy that you bring to that role before its sad conclusion?
Well, thank you, first of all. That's
Thank
so
you.
lovely. I'm going to answer it in a funny way by sort of not answering your question. But what I feel is that what I feel now about that role is that every day on Instagram, people are doing the cabaret all over the world, and they send me pictures, and they send me, would I send a message, will I say, blah, 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 can I help them with the role, blah, blah, blah. But what I really hate is that they send me, I see pictures, and it's like me. It's like I've got the little strap thing with the bow tie, and blah, blah, blah. And I feel like what I say to them is, do your own version of this. I just did the one that I thought was right, and I feel like it was right for the time, like I said earlier, the whole way, that thing. But don't just copy me. Don't send me pictures with a harness on and blah, blah, blah. Do it your own way and find, because it's not really a part, it's a sort of a symbol, a cipher for a lot of things. So that's what I try and do, is actually encourage people not to be like me and to just make it their own thing, because that's what I did. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm so starstruck. Both Ari and Alan Cumming are here. Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm from DC. I just want to say, Mr. Cumming, thank you so much for all of your inspiration. You've really inspired me throughout my entire life. You've worn many hats, and that's actually inspired me. I've gone everything from a bartender to a sign language interpreter to a political right here, to running for political office here in Washington. And it's really been an absolute inspiration for me. And you've really impacted my life in a way I don't think you quite maybe won't understand, or I expect you to understand, but you've just been such a huge impact on my life. So my question is, when doing sign language interpreting, being out in the public eye, running for political office, you don't actually realize that sometimes you do have that effect on younger people. I had people coming up to me and saying, oh my gosh, you're such an inspiration, being the only LGBTQ candidate out there, blah, 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 thank you so much for doing that. When was the moment that you realized that you were an inspiration to younger people? And what is your advice to people who want to steer young people in a better direction?
Well, thank you. I don't know when I don't remember when I first thought, oh gosh, young people look up to me or whatever. I do feel that I have this thing about every time I think about something, if there's something I have to make some decision about, and I think it's going to potentially have an effect on some sort of, I'm going to leave some imprint in terms of our culture. I always think about, I have like a little lesbian in Wisconsin, and I think if
Who does not read the New York Times.
Who does not read the New York Times. Thank you. But I really feel, I try and imagine what they would think looking at me and what I am doing. And if I am a person of privilege and out and with, fame and things like that, if I am not able to do something fully and openly and with authenticity, how could they? And that really is something that I always carry with me. It really is. I don't even know any little lesbians from Wisconsin, but it's just something. It's a sort of metaphor for something. I think that I'm always kind of aware of what it's not like when I knew that I could do this, but what I potentially could do. I do think about it. And the second part of the question was, what was it again?
How would you inspire other leaders to
How would I
lead
inspire other leaders
younger
is
people?
to be yourself, to be authentic, and to not allow I think we're in a really interesting time when all the normal rules of, certainly in politics, are gone. You know, we have socialism as a word that is actually used without horror now. White supremacy is a word that is used without horror now. And I feel so all bets are off. And I think the people that I feel are most successful in reaching people and changing people's minds are the people who are authentic. And I would make a point of saying that I don't think Trump is authentic. I think that what you see is what you get is not the same as someone who's authentic. But I really do feel that people connect to people who are prepared to be vulnerable and who are honest and authentic. And I think that's the way to go if we're going to make this world a more compassionate one.
Okay.
Quick.
Thank you tonight. Thank you for being here tonight. As a former gay boy from Wisconsin, I do appreciate all you have to say about the Midwest. My question is, how did you get involved with The Good Wife and really embody the character of Eli Gold?
Thank you very much. So in early 2010, I got asked to be in The Good Wife, and I told my agents and managers and all those people that I kind of wanted to do a TV series. I thought I'd like to be at home a bit more. I was a bit bored of traveling all over the world and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, I'd quite like to do a TV show in New York where, an ensemble, where I wasn't I wanted an easy life. And, there was a few things that came up, and I was like, oh, this sounds good. They're like, no. And this is an example of why sometimes we pay our managers and our agents such a lot of money. Because sometimes they make very good decisions or advise you really well. And so I got offered this one episode of The Good Wife, and all I knew about The Good Wife was that Juliana was in it because I saw her picture on a bus stop. And I sort of skimmed it because people were coming over for dinner. And in TV, in episodic TV, you have to read it pretty fast because it was shooting a week later. I skimmed it. I was like, what? Don't understand. What? And I remember I said, I don't want to do it. I just tell them I don't want to do it. And they all went, and my team went, I think you should look at this again. This might be an interesting thing for you. And it might be, it might carry on. And just, it's only a week of your life. And so I was like, all right. And so I was like, why are they casting me? Like a middle-aged man in a suit. I was kind of insulted. And because I'd never really played a real person before, I played sort of fantastical people and extreme, I don't know, it was just, and that's why actually The Good Wife, one of the many good things about The Good Wife for me was that actually I grew up a little as an actor because I realized that I actually am a middle-aged man in a suit. And that although I'm not Eli Gold, and also the way I thought about Eli Gold was that I think of some of the sort of, best-known characters I've played, it's like a gallery of grotesques, and he is up there with Nightcrawler or whatever, these crazy people. I feel like don't think that just because someone is a human in a suit that they're not crazy or extreme or they can connect to people in a really magnified way. And so it really changed my life, actually, in many ways. And I think the biggest thing was, as an actor, I think now that whatever I play, I've got, the very first play I ever did in Scotland, an actor said this thing to me, and I've always kind of carried it with me, but now I understand what it means. It's like, you can be as big as you like, as long as you mean it. And I feel that's, with Eli Gold, I was crazy. I mean, I was a crazy person, but actually it was from a place of authenticity, so. And also now the other great thing is that wherever I go in the world, I'm an honorary Jew.
We're happy to have you.
Shalom.
We're technically in overtime, and if people need or want to leave, we won't judge you for doing so. But because these three folks have been waiting so long to ask their questions, we're just going to try to get through these final ones.
I'm a teacher, and a lot of times my 15-year-old students will throw around sexually derogatory terms, and when you correct them about it, they'll tell you it's not a big deal, and they'll tell you where in popular culture they got it from. My question for you is, when popular culture goes awry like that, what can we as consumers of popular culture do?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I mean, I guess not buy that artist's work or not go to that play. But like, to be totally honest with you, I'm in this play right now in New York, and at the last minute, it's a play about race and queerness, and at the last minute, the very last day before the press came in, we got this huge rewrite where there was like maybe 20 mentions of the N-word. And I am horrified that I have to say that on stage every night. It was one of those things where it was just that was what we got. That was what I had to do it that night, and everyone had been sick, and I wish I'd complained more, and I wish because that was one of the reasons why I did the play, a play about race that didn't do that. And there was one of the reviews in the New Yorker, it said, it's an African-American writer, opened the review by saying that he secretly likes it when a black writer makes a white actor use the N-word. And I don't like that. But then I changed my mind, because later on he was talking about it and he went, and all I could think of was poor Alan Cumming.
He described a moment when he imagined you sitting down to look at the script for the first time,
Yes.
and your heart sinking. And
that's exactly what happened. And so I feel, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably not a good ambassador for this, because I'd say it every night, because I felt I was just railroaded. But the other thing is, only 200 people are seeing it a night. It's not like, millions of people. But I don't like that. I don't like when gay men call each other faggot. I don't buy into this thing that words of hatred can be reclaimed. I think that's a fallacy. That's a funny word to use for it, but I think it is. And
I've been using the word queer all night.
I like queer.
Okay.
I don't find
Because
queer.
it started out as an epithet.
That's true, but I don't think it was ever like faggot. I think it was sort of, I don't know. Well, we could talk about this another time.
Anyway.
I actually enjoy. My best way of being with the best prefix I would have before my name, which will never happen in the New York Times, would be queer, because I feel queer is a sensibility. I think my mum's a bit queer. I think Obama's queer. I think, you know what I mean? Queer is not just what you do with your genitals. So I like it. But to answer your question, I just think that you've got to speak up, and you've got to try and not be in situations like I was, where you were sick and the press were coming in the next day and you have to say words you don't actually agree with. But you get to speak out about it in front of a lot of people in Washington. And so maybe that message will go out somewhere else. So I just think it's very much, but you have a choice. Everything we do is a political act. And don't think that politics is just about people in this town. Everything you do is a political act. And so if you don't agree with someone, do a political act and remove them from your commerce and from your mind. Thank you.
I think my question's sort of quick. I was very young when the revival of Cabaret that you were in came out, and you haunted my nightmares for a very long time. It's okay. Eli Gold totally rehabilitated you, so it was great. I love Broadway. I've followed all sorts of musical productions. What led you to go back and do the role again? Since I don't think that's something that's super, super common.
Well, no, I mean, I did it first of all in 1993 in London, 93 into 94. And then I thought, did that. And then in 98 it was revived. It was it's going to be on Broadway. I was like, oh, that's fun. I'll go and do that and see what happens. And then so it ran and ran and ran and ran after that time, you know. And every time the sales would dip, they would like offer me gargantuan amounts of money to come back. And I was like, and then occasionally there'd be something like, would you like to do it for a month in Japan? I was like, maybe I would. But I never did. And then they just said, Sam Mendes, you know, there was two, Sam Mendes and Rob Marshall, the directors of it. And Sam called me up and said, we're thinking of doing it again. And I was just like, what? And it just felt like, it's so funny because where we were in the world at that moment felt like a good time for that story to be heard. Fuck, I had no idea it was going to be more pertinent, you know, a year later. And I sort of wish we were doing it now, but maybe it would be more depressing because it wouldn't actually, you know, wouldn't be being heard. But it was at the time of the Olympics in Russia and the way that gay people were being persecuted and all these things were starting to happen. It seemed like the idea of the two basic tenets in the show, which I feel are the need to embrace difference and to look outside of your comfort zone and see other people who are different from you and to understand them, and also to be vigilant, be incredibly vigilant, and to make sure you shut down meanness and nastiness and extremism of any negative kind. Those two tenets are what the play's about, and sadly it feels like at any time in history those two things are actually relevant because they're going to be happening. So I'm glad I did it again because, as I said, I feel the story worked better, but I feel maybe that's why I get all these things on my Instagram for, you know, 19-year-olds in a jockstrap and a harness. Is that this story is worth telling all the time because those two basic tenets are happening more so now in America, but actually maybe that's why it's, you know, maybe that's why we still do Aeschylus and Euripides and Shakespeare, that those stories they tell are about humankind and we repeat these patterns again and again and again. And maybe Cabaret is one of those shows that's about an eternal, ever-evolving kind of flaw in our psyche. Sorry to end on a downer, everybody.
No, there's one more question.
Oh, hurrah.
Last one.
Thank you.
Before I ask the last question of the evening, which is somewhat superficial, I wanted to say I became a fan starting with the anniversary party.
Oh, thank you.
I was a long time in Chicago and had some brushes with the political community there, and I just wanted to say that Eli Gold pretty much nailed it with a lot of the political types that I knew when I was in Chicago. And last night was the season premiere of The Good Fight. And the preview for next week's episode had a fairly compelling scene with Marissa with a reference to Eli Gold. And I wonder if there's any possibility that you might return as a guest star and we could see you on The Good Fight.
Here's why I won't be. Seriously, this is a thing I feel like we're talking about authenticity and about truthfulness and blah, 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 blah. And I just feel like for so long, it's been, are you going to go in The Good Fight? Are you going to, oh, maybe, oh, maybe. And then there was, like, last year, there was the time when I was going to, and they wouldn't pay me my CBS rate. And I was like, fuck you people. and so that's why I'm not going into The Good Fight, because they won't pay me the fee that I got when I was playing Eli Gold on The Good Wife.
Because it's all access now? Is it because it's on the streaming service?
No, they said to me, they offered this fee, and they said, this is more than we've ever paid to a guest star. And I went, I don't consider myself a guest star on this show. Thank you. So that's why. And I just feel like I really hate showbiz, sort of the way that you pretend something's not really true when it actually is. And so that's why I'm not on The Good Fight, because they won't pay me. Yeah. And I would like to.
Alan, thank you so much for spending your day off here with us.
Thank you, Eddie.
And thanks to all of you for coming. I have one small housekeeping note. If people could please leave through the top upstairs exit, and people attending the private reception, please have your ticket on hand and exit through the bottom of the theater. Thank you all, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.